Eve Harow comes back almost yearly. Eve Harow lives in the heart of the Shomron, what they call Judea and Samaria, what some people still maintain calling the West Bank, which is like calling Pennsylvania the West Bank of New York. But in any case, she speaks from the heart. She speaks from the heartland. She loves the land. She loves Israel. And she knows the people and what the people are saying. I can give you a 15-minute discussion on her history, her qualifications. All I can say is if you ever go to Israel, there's only one person to take you around and really give you history, and that's Eve Harow. Please welcome her wonderfully with us, Eve Harow. Rev Mendel, before we start, and you may find us doing this throughout the year, Rabbi Mendel would like to please lead us in the prayer for the Israeli soldiers. May I ask you to rise?
Thank you. Misha Berach Avosenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov v'Yevarech et Chayalei Tzva HaHagana Yisrael ha'omdim al mishmar Artzeinu v'arei Eloheinu. L'gvul halvanon v'ad midbar Mitzrayim min hayam hagadol al levo ha'arava. V'yabasha ba'avir v'yam yitein agnesi Eveinu akamim aleinu nigafim l'fneim HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishmer v'yatzal. V'chayaleinu mikol tzara v'tzuka u'mikol nego u'machla. V'yishlach bracha v'hatzlacha b'chol ma'aseh yadayim yad b'resemeim tachteyim v'ya'akrim v'geser yeshuv ateres nitzachet v'yakuyim b'hem ha'kosav. Ki ya'ina yalehechem ha'chelech imachem v'hilachem alachem ima yavechem l'shi eschem v'nomar amen. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Okay. It's wonderful to be back. It's a little more hectic to get here than it has been, as I flew over Baghdad a couple of days ago. On the plane screen, I thought, okay, just a few days ago, this was like a no-go zone, but you do what you have to do. And thanks to Alan and to Judy for the line between brilliance and insanity is very thin, so they keep bringing me back. You can decide which one of those. Want me just to launch? Do you want to ask me something?
Oh, I see what you mean. I'd like you to start by talking about something that I have noticed in hearing from not only people, but from writers from the land of Israel. And this is over the past year and a half. It's based on the fact that most of those souls, those beautiful souls who were slaughtered on October 6th, were of the political leaning of really the left in Israel. And they were living in those kibbutzim close to Gaza because they believed that Gaza should be our friends, and they brought the people from Gaza over to live and work in their communities. Little known to them that many of these people were taking notes on where everything was, and we saw the results on October 7th. What I found interesting in the Israeli news and literature and reporters, there's growing, not only in that community, but in Israel as a whole, kind of a new sense of who we are, a new sense of what it is to be Jewish. Even the heavily secular portions of the country seem to be getting towards more of this meaningful belief and feeling. And I asked Eve if she noticed that, and let's start off with that, please.
Okay. So actually, when I think what they're calling now the 12-day war started, my husband and I were in the north, we were in the Galilee, and 3 in the morning, and they gave us a pre-warning so that we could get home. But we had stayed in a hotel there because the day before, I had arranged for what's called the Hachnasat Sefer Torah, for giving a Torah to an army base. One of of the jobs that I have, I wear lots of different hats, is I work for an organization called Homefront, and someone that I know through the organization wanted to dedicate a Torah to one of these communities that Alan just mentioned, where perhaps they didn't have a synagogue, they had a spiritual awakening, and they wanted that. And looked for months and couldn't find one, mainly because a lot of the communities have not gone home yet, and they didn't want a Torah kind of sitting in the closet for a couple of years. They wanted it to be used. So I called a friend of mine who's a rabbi in the IDF. He's 72 years old, and he has been wearing uniform since October 7th. The rabbis of the IDF are incredible. They really are. And I said to him, because they're dealing with really life and death questions. These are not theoretical questions at all. And I said to him, look, here's the situation. Do you have any ideas? And he said, well, actually, we have an army base in Syria. We have a few army bases in the western part of Syria that Israel is not planning on leaving anytime soon. And he said they need a Torah. He said, we have soldiers who want to have a Torah. He said, would they mind giving there? So I said, I think I'll ask them. And they were, of course, ecstatic. They said, well, can we go to the army base? And I said, well, not unless you want to get arrested, because we're not allowed to go into Syria, but we'll get as close as we can. So on the Hermon, the most northern tip of Israel, looking above the entire country, right on the border, is where we had this ceremony the day before. And I was looking around, it was one of the most meaningful days of my life, and that's saying something. Because I looked around and I thought, these are the three pillars of my life. The army, right, Tzahal, the defense forces of the people of Israel. And if any of you are familiar with IDF, it's a people's army. Every shape, color, sex, you name it, tattoos, the whole thing, tzitzit, the whole thing. Sometimes tattoos with tzitzit. So on a girl, anything you can imagine. And I looked around and thought, these are my people. And I looked at the Torah, and I was able to, it was first time, be able to write a letter there. So First Tom was there, and I got the honor of that. And the land. And I thought, this is like everything together. And so we stayed up north, because it was a very far drive from home, and we were north. A couple of weeks previously, I did something that is probably sacrilegious, and I looked at my iPhone, and I said, oh my goodness, this is like the Urim v'Tumim. Okay, the Bible talks about the breastplate that I'm not looking at the rabbi on purpose. The Bible talks about the breastplate that the high priest wore, that had a stone for every tribe, and they asked it questions. This is during the First Temple period. They would ask questions and he would answer them. And I looked at my iPhone, I thought, oh my goodness, it's like the iPhone. Okay, when you say, Siri, can you please order me a cab or whatever? Okay, and I never thought of it that way before. I'm possibly the only person who ever did, and maybe I shouldn't have. But I thought, what's happening in Israel now is bringing us back to the very beginnings of the Jewish people, something that I think we've lost. We lost it to a great degree because most of us were wrenched out of the land and scattered around the world, and most didn't make it. We all know the torturous history of the Jewish people wherever we were. So there was that, but there was a knowledge that God was just around. He was just there. There was no such thing as being secular during that time period. Everyone just knew. You had prophecy, that you had, you just knew what was going on. Stones were talked to you, and it wasn't considered weird because you weren't worshiping the stones. That's the problem they fell into, is worshiping the things that God created instead of understanding that God was behind it. You worshiped the sun, and you worshiped the planets, and you went into all of that. That's the mistake that mankind made, and we fell into that as well. And so I look at today, because I'm constantly jumping back and forth between the past and now and the future, and looking towards our sources as a source, really, of tremendous inspiration and wisdom, mind-boggling. How every single thing that you read about in the Tanakh, you could almost find in today's headlines. Every personality, every situation, it's all there. Leadership, all of that. And I thought, this is a test for us today. Are we worshiping the pilots that did such a magnificent job at taking out Iranian defenses? Are we understanding that, yes, they were in the cockpit, and we have brilliant people who did incredible things, and intelligence like James Bond would be insanely jealous of. Like, we don't even know. I talked to one of my friends who's involved, and he said 99% of what's happened, no one will ever know that, and it's beyond. Like, you can't even make a movie about it. So I thought, we can't worship the people doing it or the machines that are enabling them to do it, which almost sounds funny, but that's what people would have done back in the day. But we have to understand that it's a partnership. It is an outstanding partnership between people doing the best they can with whatever skills they were given, and without a doubt, Hashem being right there. It just so happens that the hospital in Beersheba evacuated one of the wards like 12 hours before a ballistic missile hit it. It just so happens. It just so happens that buildings are completely destroyed, 60 buildings, and 2 people are hurt. And people were killed, absolutely. 25, 30 people were killed, people were hurt. But their intention was to kill tens, if not hundreds of thousands of us. And they had the ability and the will to do that. And there are very few Israelis, if any, who haven't said the logical, rational explanation for what just happened is a miracle. But it's a miracle, but the people are doing everything they can with it. When stores are bombed and the windows aren't there anymore, nobody's looting. I just came from Los Angeles, speaking of looting, and I'm returning to Los Angeles. Do you imagine, like, in a minute, everything's gone from that store, right? And in Israel, it's how can I help? What can I do? I have so many WhatsApp lists of, I'm traveling from Ashdod to Jerusalem, does anyone need a ride? I know some soldiers who are lone soldiers, they need something. Does anyone have a mattress? Does anyone have, we had in Gush Etzion, where I live just south of Jerusalem, that Friday, because this all started on Thursday, that Friday, 400 soldiers showed up in our area. They'd just been called out, and everyone went. In an hour, they all had meals for Shabbat and the entire day. They had anything they needed. It was like a privilege and an honor to be able to do it for them. It's hard to find the words to explain what life is like there. Terrifying. One of my sons, with his pregnant wife and his 2-year-old daughter, moved into our apartment. Right now we're living in a very small apartment because we're in transition also. And they just moved, they didn't have a safe room in their apartment in Jerusalem, so they moved into ours. We turned on the air, and I was worried about my 2-year-old granddaughter because you hear these sirens, they're very frightening. And you hear the booms, and you don't know what's going to be. And so we put them in the safe room, they slept there, and we turned the air conditioning on, and there were sirens they just slept through. My husband and I would creep in. I said to my daughter-in-law, I said, I'm glad you're already pregnant, because this would probably put the kibosh on that. In-laws coming in the middle of the night. I so apologize. I can't find the humor in things. But so that has been very, very difficult. I have 2 daughters who live in Tel Aviv. Ironically, everyone's always so worried about coming to Judea and Samaria. It's so dangerous and this, that. It's always the question that I get. Because I am a tour guide, I guide around Israel, but I love these places and they're unbelievable and they need to be seen. But ironically, these were the safest places in Israel because there's nothing that they want to hit there. There's no infrastructure. So they were aiming for the power plants and the hospitals. They were aiming for hospitals. I think we're ready. Does anybody in this room not understand the enemy that we're up against? If you think this is over, just to cut to the future, it's not over. Their ability to do what they want to do has been mitigated somewhat, but the will is still there. And we can't forget that, and we can't just suddenly say, okay, now everything's going to be great. First of all, we don't know how much damage was really done to their weapons, but they are as intent on killing all of us, or converting us to Islam as ever before. If anything, they're possibly more invested in it now because they also saw the miracles that I just explained to you. They saw them, and it upset them a lot because they see that Hashem protects his people in a very special way. So if they were pissed off before, they're really mad now. And they have to undo that. They have to prove that that's not the case. And they will keep trying. They will keep trying. So, we in Israel understand that. This is like a little hiatus. But I would hope that people in positions of power understand that and don't get fooled. Because there's a lot at stake here. And they have worked a long time to get to this point. They're not gonna give it up now. So while it would be so comforting to say, okay, that's great, and we got the bomb clusters and all of that, and now we're all good. But that would be a mistake. That would be a really big mistake. So it's not boring in Israel, to say the least. And I feel like I've been riding a roller coaster without a seatbelt for about 3 weeks now, like a serious roller coaster also. Like the one they used to have in Knott's Berry Farm that shakes, the white one. They still have that, Ghost Rider or something. That was the last roller coaster ride I took a few years ago. I said, I'm done now. Like, I've done my roller coastering. And, yeah. So, but it's, we went to sleep and there were still all these warnings and there was no school and there was no work. My husband's a physician. So he had an essential job and he was going to work. All my tourists canceled. And we were waiting, and then we woke up in the morning and suddenly there's a ceasefire and everything's fine. So, we understand that this is good, this is really good, what happened. But our pilots are not, dusting off their uniforms. By the way, when I say pilots, and I need to say, and it was wonderful that the rabbi started off with the prayer. But when I say pilots, I mean all of them. Like nobody gets into their cockpit without all the technicians and the guy that checked the rubber on the tire and the planes that refueled in midair. There are thousands and thousands of people who enable all that to happen. And so, I live in a state of perpetual gratitude for everything. Like someone said, what a crazy trip, and you flew through, my father's not well, you flew through Dubai, and you had to do this, and you had to do that. And I said, yeah, but I don't compare myself to people having a normal life anymore. I compare myself to friends who have got a call in the middle of the night that their son wasn't coming home, or someone who got a call that her husband was in the hospital and he wasn't going to be walking in the door anytime soon or ever. So that's my bar now. And so on any day that that's not happening, and on any day that I see that Israel is alive and well, and not just surviving, but thriving, and doing it for everybody. Like that, that's the feeling. I think it was, the German foreign minister, someone you wouldn't ordinarily expect. And there was even a British journalist, think about that, who said something nice about Israel, who said that the Israelis are doing the dirty work for everybody now. And we really felt that. But not in the sense of, oh, praise us, but in the sense of, okay, like this is what had to be done. It's unfortunate that more people didn't realize that it had to be done. Europe was very quiet in the past few weeks. Maybe that's good. But there's a sense of, okay, like, this is what has to be done. And we're grateful that we have the ability to do it, and that we have such brilliant minds who have enabled us to get to this point, and that life is very normal. I went to the supermarket and there was food, like nobody was going hungry. The electricity did not stop working for 1 minute. We had what we needed. We were living in this crazy war, but the government was working very hard to make sure that we had whatever normal things you would expect, which was, even that was, and I appreciated that as well. Like the feeling that someone was taking care of us, both on a spiritual level in a realm that I don't understand, but I'm humbled to be a part of and to witness, but also on a physical level, that people were really going all out. People don't even know me. People who never know who I am are risking their own lives to protect my children and my grandchildren, which for me is everything right now. And that is something that I want you to know also, because they're also doing it for you. And I think if you're sitting in this room, that you know that. All right, this is not just Israel's story. This is the story. It's not even just the Jewish people's story. It's the story of the good people, the people who get it, and get that there really is evil in the world, really, and that it has to be stopped. You know, the Tanakh version of peace is not that what I grew up in California thinking. It means that you're so strong that no one will mess with you. And it's kind of depressing, because you would like people just to like you for who you are and want everything to be good. But that's not real life. Tanakh's very much, the Bible's very much about nailing real life. And that's what we're up against, and hopefully, like Alan, started off, that even people who hoped for the best understand now. A few weeks ago, I guided a group from my hometown. I thought they asked me to take them down south. A lot of them hadn't been there, and we went, and someone else arranged for us to go to Kibbutz Be'eri, which is a kibbutz that just horrible things happened on October 7th. And we went to see Avida Bachar, who lost his wife, son, and one of his legs on October 7th. And it was so interesting to speak to him, because now he's finished. He's like, I don't want to see any Arabs in Gaza, it's us or them. But he's a farmer. He's a farmer, and he loves the land. He said they hate us because of the land, because they want the land and we want the land. Now, I don't agree with him on that. I think there's a lot of different reasons why we're hated. Choose one. But I sat there and I thought, he changed his mind politically, but he didn't change the essence of who he is. He sees things through the lens of a farmer. So when he sees that they're the enemy, it's the enemy in that sense of the land. And I never thought of it that way. I was very grateful to have the opportunity to do that. So, because that's a real honest way of doing it. He understood that he had been wrong, and he said that. He said, we thought if we gave them money and we let them in and they would like us. He said, no. But he's still framing it through the language that he understands, which is totally fine. It's totally fine. It's not only legitimate, it's real. And but he said to us, and here we came from Judea, and he was somebody. He said he's gone on record as saying that if October 7th had happened in one of the communities in Judea and Samaria, he would have said, oh, you know what? They're deserving of that because they shouldn't be there, and all the usual things that we've heard over the years. And he said, this is a man sitting there with a prosthesis and talking about his wife and his son and the whole terrible thing that happened that day. He watched them both die. And he said, I'm glad it happened to me because now I understand. And I said, wow, what courage for him to even say that. I was like, I was crying the whole time anyway, but we just went up and just gave him a hug afterwards and just looked at him, and he and I are in the same boat. Sometimes we're on, one's aft and one's fore, but we're on the same boat. It was leaking there for a while. It's patched up now, hopefully for good. But I try and talk to people all the time because I want to hear their version. It's important. One of the things that distresses me is when people who consider themselves very open-minded and progressive won't let me come talk to them because I live in a settlement. So it's like, but I thought you were so open-minded and want to hear everybody. Well, they don't really want to. They just say that they do. They actually don't want to be in a situation where maybe they'll hear something that makes them uncomfortable or, heaven forbid, even have to change their mind. So they just won't even let me through the door. So I don't take for granted even standing here, even though it's been a few years. I know the door here is always open. And that you're also just so wonderful to come. And if anyone has a question or something specific, I'm happy to answer. Okay. Or I can stand, it's fine. I'm going to be sitting for quite a few hours tomorrow. You're calling on people? Okay.
She speaks from the heart. needless to say. I just read something this morning about the pilots and the planes. This was such a far distance away, and they had to refuel in the middle and refuel again. Whenever these kinds of sophisticated machines go on these lengthy missions, the first thing that happens when they get back, God willing, if they get back safely, is that the machinists have to work on these planes for days to restore them back into good shape. What I read about was what we consider a miracle. You want to tell?
First of all, the pilots all came home. You know, when this whole thing apparently was decided on, this whole mission, they took into account that they were going to lose, in addition to civilians, because we were going to get a barrage that we would not be able to counter, that we were going to lose quite a few pilots, and they knew that. And the pilots knew that. But the pilots, who tend to come from the more secular Ashkenazi background, if you will, came back and said there's just no other explanation than a miracle. They were refueling in midair at tremendous speeds. The anti-aircraft had been taken out. The Mossad had done whatever they did on the ground. And these machines and the people piloting and navigating them, the planes were in unbelievable shape. And these pilots have said we felt like there was another force with us. They're highly trained and they did incredible things, but they felt that something else was with them. And they had a long ride to get there. I mean, Iran is not right next door to Israel. And they just felt, many of them said that, whoever can talk. I also read today that someone missed his wedding. Did you hear about that pilot? He knew when the mission was going to happen. He was supposed to get married that Thursday. And he couldn't tell his bride or the caterer, or I don't know in what order is more important that day, but he couldn't tell them. So he left in the morning. He left her a sealed envelope, and of course the wedding was canceled or postponed. But and this is straight out of the Tanakh, out of the Bible, where it says that in a milchemet mitzvah, in a war where you must go out, a groom will leave his bride under the canopy. And he said that. He said that. This is what I had to do. Literally, right out of that. So we feel that we're living something awesome. You could take awe, you could say it's awful. Aw's an interesting word, because it could mean fear, and it could be wow, and it could be both. And usually it's both. It's both, the awe. So we're living in a time of awe. And how you interpret it. A week and a half ago, I think, because I'm not sure what today is, the portion of the week was what we call the tour guides portion. It's the one about the spies, the sin of the spies. They're scouts. First they're scouts. They're only called spies afterwards because they speak ill of the land. And so the tour guides, me personally, I feel like I'm doing the tikkun, like I'm fixing the wrong that they did by showing people the beauty of the land. And I think that that's what this generation, not my generation, the younger generation, my kids' generation, is really awesome. And I think they're pulling together a lot of things, and they're fixing some of the things that over the years we accumulated, and they're making this right. And what's so incredible about them is they don't even realize it. There's no swagger. There's no like, hey, look at us. It's none of that. It's just that this is home, and this is what has to be done. And this is a generation that has a lot of capabilities. They could go get jobs, high tech, whatever, everywhere. And I spoke to my son, who keeps leaving a wife and 3 children because he keeps getting called in, and nobody's happy about it. But he said, this is it. This is home. So you do what you got to do. And it's something so astonishing to see. Yeah.
Is there any hope that the Gazans can be repopulated elsewhere?
Wouldn't that be wonderful? The question was, the president said that we should move them to somewhere else. else. It seems like nobody wants them. Can't imagine why. But I would hope that, look, there are certain countries that have like 1 billion people. This is kind of a drop in the bucket. And if they're so miserable, which apparently they are, then they should be happy to go. The truth is that a lot of them want to go, and Hamas is not letting them. And by aiding and abetting Hamas, like forcing Israel to provide humanitarian aid, and this is a whole other discussion, it's actually perpetuating the problem. There's a lot of people out there who are pretending to want to solve the problem, but they're actually not. What they're trying to do is destroy Israel. And they had a really hard time these last 2 weeks because it looks like Israel isn't ready to go down without a fight. So they're going to have to try and find other ways of doing it. And they're not going to give up either. So we'll see. We'll see. Every day brings new wonders.
It really is incredible the miracles that have occurred over this. I mean, past 6 months, it's not just the 12 days of this skirmish, this war, but just to think of the technology and how so far ahead of all of us in the world Israel has become. And it's not just the beepers in Lebanon, which make you drop your jaw and go, what?
Or drop something. They dropped something, not necessarily their jaws, but okay.
And it's just they can't be explained normally. And that's what I think Eve is saying about drawing the people together. This was not the most together country a year and a half, 2 years ago, and it's remarkable. Of course, look, if the world was attacked by Martians, we would, I hope, all pull together.
Sometimes it feels like it is being attacked by Martians.
And that's what's there. But to see the change, there's still some wackos, but to see the change that has overcome most of the people in Israel who were very much against the government, all this other stuff. This is an
Give it time, it'll come back. Yeah. But in the meantime,
an unfortunate realization. Yes, Rick.
Does that change that you're both expressing apply to the view towards Bibi?
I don't know. I know that he was getting great polling during the war. And I think that he was the right man in that chair for this war. He's based his whole political career on warning that this was going to happen. And he was right. He was right. So you can have a difference of opinion with him on a whole lot of other things, and I certainly do. But he needed, I can't imagine if anybody else was prime minister right now, if they would have taken the hard decisions that he did. In general, being prime minister of Israel has to be like the worst job on the planet. No, really, I can't even imagine. And I've met him, and I've seen him in social situations where he's not on guard. He's a human being like everybody else, but the responsibility that lies on his shoulders, knowing that you're making decisions that will cost lives, but knowing that if you don't do it now, more lives will be, given over, has to be just devastating. So, as someone who did not vote for him, but I want to publicly express my appreciation for his leadership during this time, and hope that this very fractious society that I live in will, continue to have leaders who need to do what they need to do at that given time, and not get dragged into things that aren't relevant.
Sounds very familiar, what you just said about a leader who chose to do something like this, where no other leader would have done it. I'll just leave that there. Other questions?
How about the witch hunt happening in Iran against?
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
What's been done?
Right. I mean, I'm just reading what you're reading, which is that they're going after anybody that they think helped Israel.
The other thing that amazes me and gives me pause is the fact that there's so much let's say, boasting about Mossad. Mossad said that, and
Right.
therefore we succeeded.
Okay.
Mossad means informants. Mossad means people on
Oh,
the
it's
ground.
dirty like all get out. Of course it
Why
is.
boast about it? Why
Because we live in a dirty world. This is what it is. We would all like to just wear white gloves and float through, and everybody's wonderful and everybody's great. It doesn't work like that. This is a dirty business. It is. It's surviving. And one of the things, I mean, I have had the privilege of also knowing Holocaust survivors who also, sometimes to get through, you did things that you wouldn't normally have done, but they survived. So where does that go? So I don't judge anybody. I don't judge anyone. Everyone has their role to play. I hope I'm given my role to play. I hope I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But I also know that we all are alive today because of people who did things that we would say, oh no, I wouldn't do that. That's real life. That's the world. We don't have the ability, we don't have the luxury of pretending otherwise. Somebody said to me the other day, I think the time has come for peace in the world. I said, absolutely. Why don't you tell that to the people who want to kill all of us? Okay, because I'm in. I'm totally in. But it's not up to us. And this is where I think we need to have a little bit less projection and even arrogance about how the West lives. There really are people out there who feel differently. And we need to know that. Or we will go the way of the Incas and a whole lot of other civilizations who said, oh no, that couldn't possibly be. And so we read about them in the history books. We have a lot of history, but we're not going into the dustbin of history. And so things happen. That's it.
You know, it's always good to remind us that in our country, here in the United States, you join the Army. It is a professional Army. That's what we feel to protect our country. In Israel, it's not a professional army, it's the people's army. It's basically what the Revolutionary War was. It was the people's army. There is professional, of course, but this is your neighbor, this is your gardener, this is the guy who cleans your pool. Well, that's if you're in Aspen. Not all about pools. But it's
my kid's math teacher, like my 15-year-old grandson. So he said, like, most of my teachers haven't been in the classroom this year. You know, like, this is trickled down. This is not just, this is the Army, but that means that he hasn't had teachers this year because they're fighting. So there's a lot of people who have been affected here.
And of course, you have Iran right now, the leadership. I hope you've heard that they decimated Israel and they decimated the United States. They absolutely destroyed that base in Qatar. I mean, like you said to me the other day, they lie like we breathe. It's just remarkable to listen to this stuff, and yet we're supposed to have a truce, which I don't honestly think is going to last very long, but that's just my personal opinion. But let's have more questions, please.
How much harm has been done to the Israeli economy by repetitious call up of the reservists?
I don't.
Repeat that.
How much harm has been done because of all the soldiers going out? Let's just say the finance minister had to redo the budget for this year. It's a lot. I don't have the actual numbers, but without question. Also, look, companies are not allowed to fire somebody because he went out from reserve duty, but they're also not going to advance him. He didn't do his work. The project that he was working on wasn't done. And I'm not even talking about people who work independently. Like if you're a carpenter, you haven't been building furniture this year, so you have no income. So there are a lot of people who are really, and forget the tour guides, who it's been very difficult. Yeah, so there's a lot of sectors of Israeli society that are suffering. I mean, if you look at the numbers, Israeli society as a whole, the shekel is, I think, 3.38 now. It's super strong, and there's investments. And if you happen to own shares in one of the munitions companies, is you're doing great, because a lot of these things were tested. We're literally battle tested now. Okay, but most of us don't own a piece of Rafael or Israel aircraft. So, you have to be careful with statistics, as we all know. But yes, on a day-to-day level, there are people who are really, having trouble, and we need to, look, we want this war to end. And let's remember that this 12-day war was a little piece of a war that's been now, 21 months? We still have hostages in Gaza. We still have soldiers in Gaza. This war's not over. This Iranian part is maybe for a while, but it's by no means over. We still have a lot of people who are being called up. My son-in-law was called up, and then my daughter who's in her 8th month of pregnancy had a total meltdown because her first pregnancy was right when the war started, and whatever. Thank God the baby was fine, but it wasn't a great few weeks. So he called his commander and he said, "Can I not come in now?" And his commander said, "Yeah, stay home for now, but we'll see." So it's like every day, and my daughter knows that if they really, really need him, he's kissing her goodbye and he's walking out the door. Because what he said to her is, "I have to be able to tell our children that I went out to protect them." So there's a lot here.
Thank you for coming. This is very interesting.
That was nothing. I was in the neighborhood.
So, as you know, in the papers we read here about how many innocent women and children are killed in Gaza on a continual basis. I'm surprised that the Israeli government doesn't have better people or why they're doing it. Because they sure could use a lot of help over here. They're really losing the PR battle.
I totally hear you.
Can you shed some light on
Yeah.
why they're killing all these quote-unquote
Repeatedly. Right. So
The ever.
there are people who are dying in Gaza, and it is all because of Hamas. Every single person who's dying in Gaza is because of Hamas. Okay? If you, Elaborate, because if you would just give the hostage, the people you kidnapped, back to Israel and put down your guns and stop wanting to repeat October 7th, we're done. We're not looking for this. All right? And first of all, a lot of this stuff is staged. But people have been killed. But they're being used as human shields. While we protect our kids, they use their kids to protect them. People need to understand that. When it comes to the PR in Israel, I've been doing this for a long time and completely and utterly frustrated. Also, though, just to give it a little balance, it's almost impossible. When news outlets are going to believe the Hamas numbers, and Israel fact checks. So if something happens, they say, "Oh, we blew up a wing of a hospital." Israel's going to go and fact check and look at the records and look at the aerial photos and see who was in the area at the time. And it doesn't take 2 minutes. And by that time, with social media, it's out there. And then it's like, opening a feather pillow, then go get it back. And that's a very big problem that the Israelis have, because we don't just want a knee-jerk. We do want it. But we're a Western country with the values of honesty and truth, fighting against people who use, forget dirty methods, there isn't even a word for what they do, and people believing them. And there's just something that I want to say about lying. They believe that when they lie, it's because that's what Allah wants them to do. It's l'shem shamayim in our terminology. It's for God. And I have tremendous anger with them for that, because I think that they are dragging God's name in the mud, if you will. Because when the Jewish people do things in God's name, it's give charity, it's save lives, it's honor their parents, it's don't kill, it's don't do any of that, right? So we do things that God asked us to do to make the world a better place. We haven't elevated killing to be God's will, which they write on every missile. They write that, this is the hand of God. So you can take the same idea and twist it, and that's what they have done. And we have a very big job to do here, which is to show that, I believe, that God is not just good, but he wants the world to be good. And what's happening here is just total abomination of that. And just, I hope I answered your question about what's going on in Gaza. And the pictures are awful. They really are awful. No Israelis like seeing that. So stop the war. Stop fighting us and stop, you took people, most of whom probably aren't alive. The hostages, we don't even know how many are alive anymore. And did everybody forget that? Like, we didn't start this, and we want it to end. We wanted it to end before it began. But we need your help. We need your help in that also. If you know the truth, then say it. I know people are afraid that someone won't like them or it's not politically correct. But if you're fighting for the truth, you have to stand up and say, life's not a popularity contest. We're all being tested here. And also make sure that you're getting your news from good sources. Like, seriously, if you're listening to the BBC, there's a problem. No, but really, there are people out there, like, I sometimes see the headlines and it's like, it cannot be the same story that I know. We're all part of this. This is not just on the Israeli Foreign Ministry to get the truth out. It's on all of us to make sure that the right story comes out.
We're talking here about what's going on in Israel from Israeli points of view and from what the people are dealing with and feeling sure. Please be aware that what's going on in this country with respect to university campuses, with respect to the streets of New York and other cities.
Possibly the mayor of New York.
God forbid this person who may become the mayor of New York City will be discussed in all of the speakers that we will be bringing in over the summer. Let's take a few more questions.
It's always special to have you here every summer, and I appreciate what you went through to come. In the field of positive psychology, Israel is still rated number 3 in the happiest country in the world.
You're saying 3, I was saying 11. I like your number better.
Okay. Can you talk about the post-traumatic stress that's going on for children living through this?
Yes, and there definitely is, and there are I have a master's degree in psychology also, and there is definitely that, and there are all kinds of initiatives happening now, art therapy and all kinds of books and things to help the kids through that. The whole society is I can't even say we're PTSD because we're not post, we're in it. On an individual basis, we try to minimize. Like, there was one day where my granddaughter was with me and one of the sirens went off and she immediately grabbed my leg and I just picked her up and I said, you're safe, you're here with me, there are people protecting us and we're fine, we're gonna be fine, it's okay. Was I lying through my teeth? Yeah, because I had no idea. But we're doing what we can. But there are so many initiatives. I also have a podcast once a week, and that's one of the things I've been doing is interviewing people who have, what's going to happen, which always happens with Israel, is we take lemons and make like some serious lemonade out of it. So there are going to be therapies and all kinds of initiatives that are going to be coming out of Israel that are going to help people around the world for whatever it is that they're going through. It doesn't have to be a war. It could be, a car accident, trauma. Everybody has trauma at some point in their life and how you deal with it. So, we're working on it. So why are we happy, which is the other side of your question? One is that there is, an insanity element of the Jewish people, without a doubt. But in all seriousness, because of family and community. And every single study will show you that people who get really, really depressed and even suicidal, a lot of times is because they feel alone, because they don't have anyone, because they have no meaning to their life. We have uber meaning. That's not the problem. But we really do feel together. I myself have 7 children, and God willing, my 17th grandchild on the way. And that's not the average in Israel, granted, but the average is the highest in the Western world of children. It's like 3.5 now. because we believe in the future, because we believe in family and family ties and the greater family, which is the people. And it's something that makes you get through the hardest days. Like I can't collapse because there's a lot of people who need me. So that gets me through my bad days, and then I'm able to do that for somebody else. And we just keep going that way. And it's like pushing the human spirit to its limits and beyond, really beyond. And it's a society that's very much like that. Not of angels, by the way. Like if you're planning on going to Israel and you're like think you're gonna run into like winged creatures with halos, not a one. We're human beings, very human beings, who are taking it to a level that is the greatest thing that I ever imagined, and a tremendous privilege and hakarat tov, gratitude, to be a part of this. As difficult as it is, I can't and won't live anywhere else with anybody else. It is really the honor of my life to be an Israeli woman, mother, wife. Today's my 44th anniversary, spending it with you. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. This is way beyond anything that I can ever have imagined.
Eve Harow, you came here. We cannot thank you enough that you came, you made it. All the on and off struggles going to try and get here. We have to end it now because I want to give Eve a little time for people to come up and speak with her, but she's just got to leave in 15 minutes. Eve Harow, thank you so very much.